All right, Huda Nation, let's face it, right? Paulson Adebo is going to have a little bit of an adjustment coming into the NFL, but can he earn himself a starting role in 2021? I put a little bit of an emphasis there in terms of earning that starting role because he also might not have a choice. If the Saints don't land a veteran, or even if they do, and Marshon Lattimore ends up being suspended for the first couple of seasons due to his, first couple of games due to his off-season arrest, then that could force Paulson Adebo into a starting role. But even in that case, he'd still have to instill enough confidence amongst the New Orleans Saints coaching staff to put him up ahead of guys like Patrick Robinson and PJ Williams, who are a little bit more familiar with the system. Even for all their flaws that Saints fans might want to point out, they're still the most comfortable with the system and have the most experience in it out of any of the other corners that would be the alternative at that point. Even the veteran that ended up getting signed, who might end up getting thrust into a cornerback one spot in place of Marshon Lattimore if he has to serve that suspension anyway. So Paulson Adebo still, either way, has to do enough to prove to the coaching staff that he deserves to be out on the field in 2021. Let's talk about how he can do that. The first thing that comes to mind, and of course, if you want to see more about this, you can go and head over to canalstreetchronicles.com, where I did a full write-up of it. You can read a little bit more in detail about it there. But let's just go ahead and highlight the three things that I highlighted he needs to do. The first thing is going to be maintaining and regaining his confidence from 2018. He had a phenomenal redshirt freshman season after he made the full transition over from wide receiver, although he split some time there in the final year of high school going back and forth between receiver, being a two-way athlete, right? So he was that guy for his high school. But as he got into Stanford, he made the full transition over to the cornerback position and absolutely balled out. I mean, the guy had an incredible season. 17 passes defended, 4 interceptions over the course of those 13 games. He was somebody that immediately put himself into conversation as being a future first-round pick at the cornerback spot. But 2019, he had a little bit of a drop-off. He had an injury that ended his season just 9 games in. He allowed some big plays, particularly in the game against UCF, was caught biting on some double moves and some issues that you saw with him getting beat downfield. Had a little bit of issues with his feet being a little sloppy as well. So as you look at that, the 2019 season was a season where he lost a little bit of confidence. He decided, though, that he wanted to come back for 2020. The Saints really liked that about him. Even though he ended up opting out, they really sort of put more weight in his decision to go back to re-engage his draft stock more than the actual opt-out itself, especially with all the uncertainty that was centering around the Pac-12 in the first place. But when it comes to Paulson Adebo, regaining that confidence becomes a big part of what is necessary for him to be able to get that starting role in 2021 and find his way on the field immediately as an impact rookie. Now, even though he only played 9 games in 2019, he still had 10 passes defended as well as 4 interceptions. So he had back-to-back games or back-to-back seasons there with 4 interceptions, which is something that the Saints player hasn't done in an extremely long time. Now, of course, you can look back and you can see very recently guys like Marshon Lattimore back in 2017, 5 interceptions. Marcus Williams had 4 interceptions very recently as well. So they've done this before, but in terms of having consistent interception totals, that hasn't been something that you've seen with the New Orleans Saints year over year. It's generally been, a gap or something like that in between those seasons where you see those takeaways. With Paulson Adebo, if he's able to bring his ball skills and what he's shown to be impeccable ball skills, especially as a former wide receiver who can challenge other wide receivers at the catch point, if he brings that with him in his transition to the NFL, that becomes point number 2 in terms of how he finds his way out on the field. So a big part of regaining that confidence is being able to reestablish himself as a playmaker. And that's something that you would want to see from Paulson Adebo. Remember, the Saints actually had a pretty good total of interceptions last year, 18 interceptions on the season, tied for the most, along with 2 other teams, if I remember correctly, right at the top of the NFL for interception total. However, you saw these moments to where they had these big flourishes, where they had 10 interceptions over the course of 5 games. But then you saw these dips in production, 3 interceptions to open up the first 5 games of the season, a streak of 4 games near the end of the season where they had no interceptions, and then they exploded for 5 more interceptions at the end of the season. That's a pretty big difference between 13 interceptions and 8 interceptions with a 5 interception game to close out your season against a struggling, injured Teddy Bridgewater and a rookie quarterback, essentially, in PJ Walker. So if you get a confident Paulson Adebo, and we know that the Saints put a lot of stock in confidence and size at the cornerback position, as well as the ball skills, you get that with him as well. If he's able to bring all of that to a secondary that had 3 players with 10 plus pass breakups last season, then all of a sudden you're talking about a really, really good secondary if Paulson Adebo continues to pan out. The last point in terms of one of the ways that he can find his way out onto the field is to continue to be somebody that's reliable in run support. The Saints love secondary players that can make plays in the run game. Doesn't mean you have to do it all by yourself. Doesn't mean you can't miss a tackle here and there, right? Well, anytime that you have a young secondary, you're going to want a pass rush. So delivering a pass rush for the secondary is going to be pivotal in 2021, especially if you're missing Marshon Lattimore for a couple of games. But also safety help is going to be a big part of that as well. I mean, look, Paulson Adebo got beat on some double moves pretty badly in 2019. And he got beat over the top a couple of times in 2019 as well. But if you have effective and rangy safety help over the top of him, that will certainly help him be able to make some of those plays. So definitely expect Paulson Adebo to get a lot of attention here as the offseason rolls along and training camp is right around the corner.